Washington, D.C. is unfortunately in the midst of its most violent year in nearly 2 decades. And as a result, a member of its city council is now calling for the National Guard to get involved in order to quell violent crime. Now, in a statement, the council member who is calling for this, Trayon White, who represents Ward 8, argued that, quote, "The crime is out of control and getting worse by the day. We must declare an emergency regarding the crime and violence in our neighborhoods and act urgently. It may be time to call on the National Guard to protect the children and innocent people that are losing their lives to the senselessness." And just to interject, it does appear that the victims of these crimes are increasingly younger victims. So a lot of minors are dying as a result of these shootings and these homicides. He continues to say, quote, "I'm tired of burying our children. We are too comfortable with the state of our city. We must take action to gain control and protect our residents. Law enforcement is only one part of how we combat public safety issues. It will take all of us to heal our community." And to be fair, he's not wrong to call out the increase in violent crime in the area and how it victimizes the local community there. Just to give you a few numbers, DC has recorded 161 homicides this year alone, a 28% increase over this time in 2022. In just over 7 months, the city has surpassed the total number of killings that occurred in all of 2018 and is on track for the deadliest year in 2 decades. And it is not lost on me that earlier this year, the DC City Council was trying to, loosen some of their laws pertaining to these crimes, but they've done a complete 180 ever since. They weren't able to pass what they were trying to do earlier in the year, mostly because Congress intervened and prevented them from doing so, which they are able to do as it pertains to DC specifically, but I guess now they're kind of happy that happened because it appears that the city council is pushing for some tough on crime policies. And in fact, about a month ago, they passed an emergency measure that does in fact implement some stiffer penalties for violent crimes and makes it easier to detain individuals and keep them detained pending their trial if they engaged in certain violent crimes. Cenk.
Okay, so there's 2 issues here. One is this actually happening? And number 2 is why is it happening? So for a while, folks on the left were pretending that crime was not going up in these major cities.
Oh, they still are.
Yeah, and some of them still are, and it's absurd. No, the crime numbers are clearly going up all across the board in these cities. And by the way, the voters are throwing out people on the left that brought in the new policies. They are. Those are facts. They might be inconvenient facts for our quote unquote our side, but facts win. It is what it is. And so, and you can tell because here's the city council in DC turning around completely and going, "Our bad. No, we need more protection." And the NAACP in Oakland said, "For God's sake, get us more protection. We're not asking you to go and beat up our kids or put them in jail for no reason, but we are asking you to stop the criminals, stop the actual criminals," right? NAACP in Hawaii joined that statement. So this is happening all across the country where now communities are saying enough, this is not working. So if you're hearing from some folks on the left that it's not actually happening, ask them for the numbers. They'll probably pull numbers that are old for you. And so don't let them cherry pick stuff. You can tell from the actual constituency that there's no question that it's happening. Plus the numbers are very real, right?
And what's causing the rise in various cities really does vary depending on which city you're in, right? So in the case of Washington, DC, one of the issues was in response to the 2020 protests and what happened to George Floyd, they implemented a hiring freeze for a year. And so look, there's natural turnover when it comes to policing. That's normal. People retire, people resign. But as a result of those protests, a higher volume of officers decided to resign because they felt targeted. They didn't want to be cops anymore. And then on top of that, there was a hiring freeze. So right now in DC, there's actually a pretty severe shortage of officers. We could talk about that in more detail in just a moment.
Yeah, so now when we get to the issue of why is it happening, I think there's three potential reasons. So one is this idea that they cut funding for police in DC. So I looked into that at length, and it turns out not really. So they gave the mayor, Bowser, 15 million less than she asked for, but it turns out they did take that 15 million and put it into other services like victim services, community outreach, etc. So it's not less overall. And then how about vis-a-vis the year before? They also cut 15 million coincidentally from the year before, but it wasn't really a cut. They just transferred it from the Metropolitan Police to the police that handle public schools. So in reality, the police budget wasn't really cut, okay? Or at least the overall budget for security in Washington, D.C. wasn't necessarily cut. But they did do the hiring, which moves us to reason number 2, potentially. They did do the hiring freeze. There is more attrition from cops, some of which I don't mind. Those are the biggest bellyachers. Oh, now we got to do our job. This sucks. We can't just beat up people. This sucks, right? So, but you do have to replace them, right? And they're having a lot of trouble recruiting. And it's not just Washington, D.C., again, all across the country, partly because people have seen that cops are a lot of times the villains. And before, nobody saw that. So a lot of people would sign up to be a cop thinking they're gonna be a hero, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a lot of people don't wanna sign up to be a cop because they don't wanna be a bad guy.
People wanna work in a respected field. And if all of the messaging surrounding policing in America is negative, that's going to make it less desirable for people to pursue that career path. That's what's happening.
Yeah, and so the bottom line on it was whether there was funding cuts or not, there are now definitely less cops in Washington. And the community's worried that that's part of what's causing the problem, okay? So then the last part here is also important, which is prosecutions, really important. And the outgoing police chief, when they left, said, look guys, my real assessment of the problem, and take it with a grain of salt. He's the police chief and he doesn't want the blame, he wants to shift the blame. But he said 2/3 of the folks we brought in, they would just release and they wouldn't prosecute. So we got tired of bringing in people that they were just going to release. And so, but that does show you they got quote unquote tired of it, right? And so I'm paraphrasing to be fair, I'm putting it in quotes, but so that is partly on the cops. But yes, a lot of cities are realizing recidivism is the #1 problem in these situations. And so some people can be helped with different things ranging from restorative justice to light punishment, parole, et cetera, et cetera. But some folks are hardened criminals and you let them out and they commit not 1 crime, but 11 crimes before they get back into court. So people are now beginning to realize, hey, maybe we should be tougher on anyone who does a second violation while they're out on bail, for example, or no bail. So there are different things that if you dive in can get us to better answers. But unfortunately, the left doesn't want to talk about it because they want to pretend everything's hunky-dory. And the right wing has, as usual, kooky answers that are not that productive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just think that people who commit violent crime and are a threat to public safety need to be taken out of the public. And they need to be, like all of these ridiculous arguments about like, no, but we need to focus on community outreach. Okay, but the devil's in the details. What does that entail, right? So the $15 million that was redirected to community outreach, what does that mean? Does that mean that millions of dollars were funneled to nonprofits? Because I've seen how the nonprofits work in LA.
Yeah, and look, there's tons of devil in the details. Victim services sounds really good, but how exactly did they apportion the money to victim services, and maybe they did a great job. Or it's also possible they did a great job in giving the money to victim services and community outreach, but it turns out, no, you need to hire more cops. And so as much as you're doing community outreach, there's just too many crimes going on now, and you just need law enforcement. But I should be clear, there's actually one more factor, and it's what the local police chief now is saying, the current one I should say.
And yeah, Pamela A. Smith is her name. She's been on the job for about 4 weeks now.
Yeah, and tons of other folks are saying it, which is there's so many more guns now than there was in the past. Or we had tons of guns before, but now it's a completely different level. And they're like, it's just a tsunami of weapons, and almost everybody's got an AK-47 or an AR-15, and it's just a shooting gallery outside in Washington, D.C. So the combination of more guns, some lax rules, less cops has led to a worrying rise in crime. That is not Republicans saying it. It's local communities in DC and other places saying, enough, we need someone to protect us.
Final thing I'll say is, if you're curious how the National Guard would be implemented to fight crime in DC, you're right to be curious about it. And unfortunately, I don't have answers for you. So look, it's one city council member who has proposed this. Previously, there was other local officials who had also wanted to use the National Guard in order to respond to crime. But the National Guard, they're not supposed to be armed, and they're not supposed to be armed against the American people. So I don't exactly know how they would be utilized in this regard. There is a shortage of cops. They need to find a way to recruit people, right? But what would the National Guard do exactly?
No, they would do nothing. This is not for the National Guard. He's just desperate. This doesn't make, National Guard is for quick emergencies. Hey, MAGA is invading the Capitol, can you come help, right? This is not for law enforcement. Law enforcement is for law enforcement. So it's a misguided idea, but I get that he's desperate and he's grasping at straws here. And the answer is not either crack everybody's skull and just target minorities and go back to kicking people's ass for no reason. And it's not, hey, we don't really need law enforcement or prosecutions. No, the answer is, of course you should arrest and prosecute violent criminals. Everyone agrees with that, other than tiny percentages on the outer reaches of the political spectrum. So let's get going and just do law enforcement, and law enforcement that's actually fair. It is not too much to ask for. It's just asking for the bare minimum, which unfortunately we're not getting in a lot of places. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.